Tonight we're going to read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. The day was Christmas Eve, many years ago. The weather was cold and snowy. Busy in his counting house, old Ebenezer Scrooge was counting his money. In the freezing outer office, Bob Cratchit, Scrooge's clerk, sat shivering. "Tomorrow is Christmas Day," said Bob Cratchit to his employer. "Will you be needing me to come to work, sir?" "Christmas Day, bah, humbug," replied Scrooge. "I suppose you must have the day off, but be sure you're here even earlier the day after Christmas. Christmas is a poor excuse for being a lazy clerk." Just then, Scrooge looked up with a frown from his counting desk, having heard a sound outside the window of his office. He went to look. Carolers had gathered in the street, and Scrooge could hear their cheerful song, "God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay." Scrooge threw open the window and shouted to the carolers, "Be on your way! Can't you see we are working here?" "Merry Christmas," the carolers sang out. Before he closed the window, Scrooge replied, "Bah, humbug! Only fools go around with Merry Christmas on their lips." Scrooge went back to counting his money. A smile came to his face as he looked at the piles of gold coins on his table. He was interrupted by a knock at his door. Two gentlemen came into his office. The first said, "We are here to collect some money for the poor. It is Christmas Eve, and many have no food for the holidays." Scrooge remarked, "I haven't time for all this talk of Christmas. What rubbish! Let the poor take care of themselves. Don't bother me." "But, sir," protested the second man, "surely you must want to help those in need." Shaking his fist, Scrooge croaked, "Christmas! Bah, humbug!" That night, Scrooge went home to his lonely house. He ate a cold supper and then went to bed. In the middle of the night, he was awakened by a strange noise in his room. He sat up in bed and stared at the ghostly figure in front of him. He saw what looked like a person in a white robe moving slowly toward his bed. The figure spoke to Scrooge. "Come with me. I am the ghost of Christmas past." Scrooge rubbed his eyes, but the ghost was still there. Although he was frightened, Scrooge did as the ghost asked and got out of bed. Suddenly, Scrooge found himself walking with the ghost up a lonely road. Before them was a large and ancient building. Scrooge and the ghost went through the door. Inside, alone in a room, sat a young schoolboy. All the other boys had gone home for Christmas, and this child was left with only the schoolmaster for company. He seemed very sad indeed. Scrooge saw the boy and said, "Why, that looks like me when I was young. I know just how it feels to be left alone at Christmas." "Exactly," remarked the ghost. "I am showing you your own Christmas of long ago. That's why I am called the ghost of Christmas past." The next thing Scrooge knew, he was back in his bed. Then he heard another strange sound, and a second ghost appeared. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the figure. Scrooge suddenly found himself looking into the home of his clerk, Bob Cratchit. The Cratchits were just finishing eating the smallest pudding Scrooge had ever seen. Yet they laughed and smiled as if it was a feast fit for a king. They were celebrating Christmas, even though they had tea instead of wassail to drink and could not afford a Christmas turkey. Bob Cratchit's youngest son, Tiny Tim, was so frail that he had to use a crutch. But he said to his brothers and sisters with a smile, "Merry Christmas to you, everyone." Back in his own bed again, Scrooge was soon visited by a third ghost, who said, "I am the ghost of Christmas yet to come." Just then, Scrooge saw three men strolling along a street on Christmas morning, talking to each other. "Yes, I hear that Scrooge is sick," said the first. "Who cares what happens to him?" remarked the second. The third man nodded in agreement. "Anyone who calls Christmas humbug doesn't deserve our help," he said. Scrooge realized they were talking about him. The next thing he knew, Scrooge was back in bed, and the morning sun was coming through the window. It was Christmas Day. As soon as he could get dressed, Scrooge hurried to the market and bought the biggest Christmas turkey he could find. Then he bought pies and cakes and puddings and fruit, and he had them all sent to the Cratchits. Scrooge went back into the street. As he walked, he gave money to people along the way who seemed too poor to buy Christmas gifts for themselves or their families. He passed the carolers that had visited his office the day before. They looked at him first with surprise and then with smiles as he called out a hearty "Merry Christmas!" That Christmas Day, Scrooge went to shop after shop and bought Christmas presents for every member of Bob Cratchit's family. He bought dolls for the girls and balls for the boys. He bought warm scarves and mittens for all the children. For Mrs. Cratchit, he purchased a lovely handkerchief, and for Bob Cratchit, a pair of handsome gloves. Best of all, for Tiny Tim, he bought a toy puppet. After he had gathered up all his gifts, he went to the Cratchits. He burst in the door with his arms full of presents, crying, "Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas!" Scrooge and the Cratchit family had a Christmas dinner none would ever forget. That night, they ate their fill of turkey with all the trimmings and then opened their gifts. As they all sat around the fire, Tiny Tim looked at the happy, smiling faces and said, "Merry Christmas! God bless us, everyone!"